Me now for the stocks ahead of the opening bell. Jess Menton is on set. Jess, what have we got?
Good morning, Manus. We have another busy week of earnings. Even though we've already had about 80% of the market cap for the S&P 500 having reported, we have another 4% or about 56 companies. Disney, of course, fresh off that victory from its proxy fight, and Arm, Uber, Airbnb, and Palantir. Of course, I have to point out Berkshire Hathaway shares Class B, looking at that stock up about 1% pre-market trading after Berkshire held its annual shareholder meeting where Warren Buffett actually, his conglomerate, reported a nearly 40% surge in year-over-year operating margins for the first quarter. But the big news, of course, looking over at Apple, Berkshire did trim its stake in the company, one of its largest positions since Buffett's deputies first invested in 2016, though he did say the figures do underscore the difficulty his team have had trying to find worthwhile investments. If you go and look at Apple's stock, up actually down about 0.4%, but it is coming off of its best week relative to the S&P 500 since July 2020. And then, of course, there is Paramount. Berkshire cut its Paramount exposure entirely at a loss. This does come after the New York Times did report on Sunday that Paramount Global has agreed to formally begin negotiations for a buyout group led by Sony Pictures Entertainment and Apollo Global Management. If you look at that stock, it's actually up close to about 5% in pre-market trading, Manus.
Okay, Jess, thank you very much. Keeping an eye on the movers. Coming up, it is Apple. Berkshire Hathaway, as I said to you, reporting that it's trimmed its stake in the company, despite Warren Buffett praising the tech giant. Jess Menton is with me, so a little bit of a shave, but it's still going to be at the core, a key part, as he says, unless there is a major move in Apple.
And to your point, Manus, traders are looking for whether or not the worst is over for this stock after it technically entered a correction off of those December highs back in March. So actually going into its earnings report last week, that stock was already down more than 10% off of those highs. But of course, as we know, it did announce that historic buyback program that it still has not executed yet, but it did announce this. So when you are looking at this stock, it actually topped 180 last week for the first time in 2 months, where you're seeing that stock now down just about 0.1%. Still down about 5% for the year, so underperforming the S&P 500. But when you are looking at Berkshire Hathaway, did trimming its stake of the company. So this was one of its largest positions since they did initiate one back in 2016. At the industry groups in the S&P 500, you have 10 of the 11 groups higher. If you look, what's really driving things is the energy sector. So this does come as U.S. oil prices are rising this morning, actually trying to recover from last week's steep losses. You do have WTI topping about $78 a barrel. Of course, if you look on the other end of this, consumer staples are flat this morning. Have to point out, though, when you are looking at the NY FANG index, that's actually up roughly 4% so far this month, continuing to edge higher this morning. Of course, have to point out there's only been 4 sessions so far this month, but of course the biggest weighting when you are looking at this particular index is Alphabet. Also another big weighting, of course, is Tesla and Apple, but Apple's the only one so far this month out of them that have reported. But we do have Nvidia coming up on May 22nd, so all eyes on that.